Okay, so we are at the cutting table and I'm starting to lay my pieces out. I am somewhat following the guide sheet, but don't forget we're on tunic B. We're using B. The pieces you need are pieces number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So there are 6 pieces. If your fabric is only 45 inches wide, pay attention to the layout. They have a layout for 45 inches wide in 2 sizes, and they have a layout for 60 inches wide fabric in 2 size categories, and then they have the layout for the intersect facing. So go ahead, pin your pieces down, go ahead and cut them out. Don't forget, when I cut my notches, this point here, when I cut out a notch, this is a notch, this right here. If I say notch, we're talking about these. And then, of course, if we say dots or circles, of course, we're talking about those. When I cut my notches, when I'm just sewing for me, I just make a little slit. But for our purposes today, I'll be cutting into that triangle. So lay your pattern pieces out, get them cut, and then when I take mine off one at a time. I don't take all my pattern pieces off and mark them all at the same time. When I'm working with the sleeve, I'll remove the pins and mark my notches. When I'm working with the back, the yoke back, the front, each one, I'll cut them all, but I won't take them loose from my, take the pins out until I get to that particular step. That's how I like to sew. Sometimes I'll do it a little bit different, but of course that's the way I'll be doing it today so that you can follow right along. So if sometimes the pieces need ironing, you can smooth them out with your hand. I've used this pattern before, so I may end up having to iron something that's pretty wrinkled, because if it's too wrinkled, you won't get the true size of the pattern. I got my guide sheet right here in front of me. I have my scissors and everything right here to the right of me, and of course here are my pins. So go ahead, lay your pieces out according to the guide sheet, pin them down, or use your pattern weights. You may have you'd be using pattern weights and a rotary cutter. I do have pattern weights. I like pins, but I have pattern weights that I made. And actually, I don't use my rotary cutter, so I'm going to be using pins. And just to make a note there, Raven Maureen, who is an excellent sewist, now has designed pattern weights. So if you go to her channel, you can see how you can go into her shop and order a couple of her pattern weights. Okay, so go ahead, lay it out, pin it down, or use your pattern weights and use your rotary cutter and get all the pieces cut out, and we'll be back. Okay, so you should have cut out all 6 pieces. You needed to go ahead and interface the collar and the neckband. It says neckband, and then the long piece, what do they call it? Yeah, front band. So you have a neckband, which is your collar, and you have a front band. So you would have needed to go on ahead and interface those pieces. However, if you haven't done it yet, we still have time. So the instructions for view B actually begin on page 3, top B. The first set of instructions are for top A. We're not making A unless you are making A, but A is just a little bit different. We are working with top B. What did I do with it? I'm sorry. We're working with top B. this one right here. If you're working with top A, there's a placket there that's a little bit different. So I'm hoping that you're working with top B. And those instructions begin on page 3 of the 4-page instructions. And you can see where they told you to go ahead and do the interfacing. So the first thing we're going to do is the front and the back. It tells us to gather the upper edge of back between notches. So when you cut out your back, you have your whole back piece that was cut on the fold. So I'm sorry. so you have your back piece. It was cut on the fold, but there's a notch here and there was a notch here. So the 2 notches, and we have to gather those. And you gather by making 2 rows of like basting stitches. So it looks like this. The bottom row is your 5/8 inch seam. The bottom row is your 5/8 inch seam, and the top row is just, maybe an 1/8, if that, up above it. But my machine, my longest stitch is 5. So turn your machine to the longest stitch and make the 2 rows for your gathering. You make it here, and of course you can see exactly what that looks like on the pattern sheet here. Once you have those 2 rows gathered up, or the gathering stitches made, in order to gather it, please be sure to use a long stitch length. In order to gather it, you have to take the bottom threads. So there's 2 threads on the bottom. These are the bobbin threads, and they allow you to pull. And once you pull, you will see that it is starting to gather. So you can pull it to the middle, and then pull from the other end to the middle. Some people pull it all the way. You can do that. I hate risking my thread breaking. Now I've gathered it up. Those are a lot of gathers right there. But what we're going to do now is attach the yoke. This is the back yoke. I'm sorry. This is the back yoke piece. We are going to attach it. And the back yoke has the notch here and the notch here, just as it did on the back of the top. You're going to put the pieces together, right sides together. So here's a right side and here's a right side. You're going to match up your notches first. I use different pins when I'm actually pinning. So you're going to match up your notches. Just pin it at that notch, pin it at this notch. We do have to pin it all the way to the edge. So you want to pin it to the edge. And that's the same on both sides. Just making sure, if it's hard to tell your fabric from one side or another, just make sure you got the 2 right sides together. Now when you pin it, it's going to look like this, and you're going to have all this extra from the yoke. So this is when you even out your gathers. You just start, start smoothing them out. You do have, there wasn't a notch there, but because it was cut on the fold, I can still see my fold line on the yoke, even though I ironed it, and I can, I think, I can still see my fold line on the back. Let me be sure I'm looking at the right line. Yeah, what we should have done was snipped it just so we would know for sure. But take the fold line from the yoke and take the fold line from the back and pin those together, and then even out your gathering stitches between the notches. because I have made this before, I do happen to know it's not a lot of gathers. So if it looks like you're pulling and running out of gathers, you are. For some reason, this particular pattern, even though on the back of the pattern, it looks like a lot of gathers on the back, but it's not, because I'm having the same experience I had the first time I made this. So obviously it wasn't me. It's just the way that they did it. But get it evened out as best you can. Now, if you have finished off your seam, meaning these ragged edges, you may have serged them already, or you may be planning to serge. I'm not serging. I'm actually going to be sewing with French seams. So, and when I get to that, I'll show you, of course, what that means. So what I'm doing is I cut a second yoke. And let me get this pin and I'll show you what I mean. I'm not really the best at these gathers, but it be looking all right. Because these, wait a minute. This sure is kind of stretching. I mean, not stretching, but the gathers aren't. Okay, that's better. It's a little bit more even. Okay, so let's pin this back at that fold line. Yes. Pin it down. And use as many pins as you need. I don't use a lot of pins always. Sometimes I need to. Now, if you're not serging and you're going to follow me to the letter, take a quick moment and go and cut another back yoke. If you don't have enough of the same fabric, you can use a solid color of anything that you've already had, or you may just need to leave it the way it is and then of course go back and serge your seams. If you don't have a serger, we can always do the zigzag and clean it up. So let's take a moment to go ahead and sew this. We're going to be sewing right on that bottom gathering line. That's a 5/8 inch seam. Yeah, so we're going to be sewing right on that gathering line. There are some places that is requiring a 3/8 inch seam, and when we get there, I will of course let you know. Yeah, so go ahead and attach from the end, being sure, from the end, being sure to back stitch. Go all the way down that 5/8 inch seam. You're going to be running on the bottom line of the gathering stitch that we made all the way to the end, and be sure to back stitch here. Now, if you're following me and going to add the other yoke, I'll do that next. I still go ahead and attach this one first, and then I go back and put the other one on. Once you have made that seam, you flip it over just to make sure you're satisfied with the way your gathers look, and then of course clip your threads. Okay, so I have sewn my seam going straight across. Now, some people pull that gathering stitch out. I don't always pull it out. If I flip over and see this and I see some gathering stitch, I will pull it out then. Otherwise, for the most part, I leave it. So you want to clip your threads. Some of my gathering threads got caught on the outside, so clip your thread. Oops, sorry. And if you're going to serge, go ahead and serge this seam closed now. If you are going to zigzag it, or if you're going to follow me and do the yoke, get your scissors. And I'm usually not all over the place, but today I am like really having a hard time. Get your scissors. These are not paper scissors. These are my good scissors. and trim your seam. You only need to trim off about 1/4 of an inch. And that's because you don't want it thick. Now, if you're surgeon, then your surgeon will be cutting that for you. Either way, we want to make sure the garment is neat on the inside. I'm not used to sewing like this. I'm looking at my pattern pieces and all of that sitting out. I don't normally do that. So I'm trying to work with it, I'm leaving them out just in case I need to point something out. So now, if you're following along with me, we have to do this extra step where we are taking the second yoke. Here's the part. But this is the seam I'm trying to cover up. Now, I could easily top stitch that down. It probably would keep it from raveling any further. But I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do is, I'm not even going to do the burrito method. I'm just going to get it on here, cover this stitch up, and then I'll treat the yoke as if it's one piece. So the wrong side is facing me. I'm going to take the right side of the yoke and pin it to the wrong side and pin it right on top of the seam that I already have. Now, had I not been doing the video, I would have sewed it all together at the same time. But because I am doing the video, then of course, now it's an additional step that we need to take. So if you are following me on that, be sure to pin it. We don't have notches anymore because we trimmed the seam already, but it should just fit the same way. It should fit, even though mine looks as though it's stretched a little bit, but it should fit the same way the original one fit. So get it pinned on here and sew it on down. Now, once you get it sewn down, you're going to then see the right side of the yoke facing the wrong side of the back piece. But that's correct, because when you raise it up, you've got the right side of the yoke, the right side of the back, and then you flip it up. And even though this is right side to wrong side, it's going to be nice and clean. I keep doing that. I'm sorry. It's going to be nice and clean on the inside. So I'm going to go and sew that yoke piece on now. I'm going to press it up, and then I will base the two shoulders together so that I can treat it as one piece. I'll base the shoulder, the neck, and the shoulder, and then it becomes one piece. So I took the right side of the second yoke, pinned it down to the wrong side of the shirt, the back shirt, sewing it across. Then I'm going to raise it up so that I'm looking at the inside back yoke, right side, the inside of the shirt, which is the wrong side of the fabric. I'm going to pull my original one up and then baste them together so that I have one nice, neat looking back piece. Okay, so I got my yoke on the inside. It's nice and clean. I'm sorry, I am new at this, trying to adjust. There you go. Got my yoke on the inside. It's nice and clean. This is the outside, the right. This is the outside, the right side of the shirt. Right here. I am so sorry. I will be looking over this. If it's not right, of course, I can't post it. Now we are going, according to the instructions, we are going to sew the front and back together, and we're going to sew that at the shoulder seams. They don't do the side seams right away because they put the sleeve in while the side seams are still open, which is great. I think that's the better way to do it anyway. So we're going to take the two front pieces and we're going to do right sides together. So the right side of my shirt to the right side of the back shirt. At the shoulder, there is a notch there. So pin at the notch, right there, pin at the notch. Pin at the, go to the end and pin, and you'll notice that the right front has this little curve there, and that's seam allowance. So it really fits right into the edge, I don't know if you can see it, of the shirt. So pin your notch, pin the edge by the neckline, pin the edge by the armhole, and then pin it all the way across so that you know it fits right. Using as many pins as you like. Sometimes you need a lot of pins. Sometimes you can get away with just a few. We're going to put them in here, you know. So they're here. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to pin at the notch. I'm going to match these corners up and the curve from the back neck and the curve from the top of this front piece going into the neck they fit right snug into one another. And you know what? Go ahead and do those seams now. You're going to sew back stitch here, sew all the way across to the edge here and back stitch, and that's going to be 5/8 of an inch. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to back stitch here, you're going to sew all the way across to the neckline and back stitch there. For me, I'm doing French seam. So if you're serging your ends or just using the pinking shears, this is what yours will look like. But for me, doing a French seam, you have to do 2 seams. When you're French seaming, you sew the garment together just as the way it should look. So now the inside of my shirt is facing me and the right side is underneath, but the inside of my shirt is away from me. Here is the right side, and this is what I pin. The same way at the shoulder. But when you're looking at it, it looks as though you're looking at it the way, well, it does look the way that it's going to look when it is a finished garment. French seams allows all the stuff, the raveling, the seams and everything to be on the inside. Because I'm not serging and I wanted to show this French seam. So mine will look like yours. However, I will be wrong sides to wrong side. You will be right side to right side. Now, I'm going to sew just 1/4 of an inch, probably more of an 1/8. You sewed 5/8 of an inch. I'm sewing probably 1/8 of an inch from this point here, the neck, across the shoulder to the end, and the same on this side. Then I flip mine out and sew mine the way that you sewed yours. So go ahead, sew that seam now, and I'll show you what mine will look like when I'm finished. Okay, so you should have sewed your shoulder seams together, your front to your back, right sides facing together, right side, right front, back. Yeah, right side of the front, right side of the back would have been together. You would have made your seam. So I made the same seam you made. It's just when I did the French seam, it gave me a clean seam like this on the inside. One of the reasons I'm doing this is to show you a French seam, but also is because I don't want to change the thread on my serger, and this fabric, this cotton, is raveling. I'm also noticing that it's stretching, so I'm having to be very careful, especially when it comes to these curves. So I'm glad I have a stay stitch right around here. So this is what your garment is looking like so far. This is the inside. This is what it's looking like so far. Now, at this point, before we put in the sleeve, this is a good time to just kind of drape it around your shoulder like this. Because if you notice, this shirt is quite long. You see? On me, it would be like a shirt dress. But you might like it this length. I'm going to leave mine. The one I made before is shorter. I cut it shorter. But I'm going to leave mine because once I close it up, it's going to look really cute with some leggings or really tight, you know, not tight, but close fitting pair of jeans. But this is what you are looking like so far. Okay. So now it's time for the sleeve. Now, when you look at your sleeve pattern, here's your sleeve pattern. You should have cut all the markings because, let's get this camera right. Okay. Several markings. You have a notch here, and then on the other end there is a notch. Usually those notches are for front and back. On this pattern, it's a single notch on both sides. It would normally be a single notch and a double notch so you could line up the front and the back. So on this one is single notches. When I made it the last time I made this, I realized that they didn't, it's exactly the same, you know, size, width and everything, front and back. Because the way it's put in is not shaped, you know, like a sleeve can be shaped. So just make sure that whatever you do on one side, you do on the other. You want to mark, there's 3 dots here, and you want to mark those dots. This one is the center dot, and then you'll have a dot to the left of the center. You'll have a dot to the right of the center. Those dots are where you kind of can do a little bit of gathering. Remember when we did the 2 stitches, gathering stitches on the yoke? You can do a little bit of that on here if you wanted to. I don't think it's going to be necessary, but still just mark them. So you'll be marking this dot, which is the center. That's let me see, that's this dot right here. And then you'll be marking the ones to each side. And when you cut your pattern, those are kind of like, they're not, yeah. When you cut your pattern out for your top, you will have marked there also where we can tell, because on your top, there's a marking here. Here's the shoulder seam, which is where that middle dot is going to go. And then you have another marking here. So these will all line up, you'll see. So let's go ahead. I'm sorry, you guys, I had to put these pieces away. This is driving me crazy. I do have my guide sheet right here in front of me. So I'm going to take the right side of my first sleeve. I'm going to take the right, here's the right side. Here's the right side of the shirt, and I am going to turn my shirt so that I am looking, the neck is facing me, and here is where I'm getting ready to pin the sleeve. And this is the right side of the shirt. This is the right side right here of the sleeve. So right side to right side is how you're pinning. Now remember, I'm doing French seam, so I'm going to flip mine over, but I'm going to show you just like this. So here's that center dot. Remember, here's a dot here. Here's a dot in the middle and a dot on the side, and then of course your notches. That center dot matches up with this shoulder seam. So go ahead and pin the center dot of the sleeve onto the shoulder. And then if you notice, the next dot will line up with the next dot on the sleeve. Now the sleeve is going to be a little bit bigger, and that's because if you have gathered it, you would ease it in. As a matter of fact, let's take this loose. We're going to go ahead and gather from this notch, go past the center notch until the second notch. So just that little bit, let's go ahead and gather. Once we get that gathered, we'll come back and we'll pin it just the way I had said to pin. So let's get that done on both shoulders. I'm so used to just kind of working it. I know how to sew it to make it fit. So please forgive me. We do need to do those gathers, and we'll be right back. Okay, now you did the gathering the same way we did the yoke. The bottom seam is 5/8 of an inch, and the top one is 1/4 or an eighth, as long as it's above. Here are those 3 notches and 3 dots in the top of the sleeve. 1, 2, 3. Now let's go ahead and match them up. If you're following me the French seam way, just wait a moment. This is for if you're serging all of your seams, or if you just did the zigzag. So take that center dot and line it up with the shoulder. So the center of the sleeve would of course line up with the shoulder seam. So we're going to pin that. Now when you did the gathering, it automatically gathers the fabric just a teeny bit. So that will probably be enough for the amount you need to ease the sleeve in. But even if it's not, match your next dots, your next set of dots, 1 on each side of the shoulder. And if it's not fitting right now just from the automatic gathers, then we'll gather that in. Now there's a notch. You're close to the bottom. There's a notch here, and there is a notch in your shirt. So you want to pin that. And you want to pin the edge. Now it's going to hang over like just a little tag on the end, but that's correct, because once I do that 5/8 inch seam, the edge of the sleeve will line up with the edge of the side of the blouse. So go ahead and pin that. And once you get it pinned, you're going to do the same thing we did on the yoke. You're going to ease that, pull that gathering stitch and ease between these 3 dots. However, the blouse does not have gathering. The sleeve is not gathering. So you have to ease it, like play with it, until it's completely smooth. Once you sew over the seam, you should have a straight line as though, or a straight fit as though there were no gathers there at all. And that will happen. It doesn't really look like it, but once you finish maneuvering it, that will happen. So you can get ready to do that. For those of us that are doing the French seam, we always turn our garments so it looks like it's already finished. So I take the wrong side of my shirt and the wrong side of my sleeve, and I pin it the exact way I just had you pin yours, so that on mine you see the raw seam on mine, and then I flip mine over and sew it a second time. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pin shoulder to that middle dot. We have the notch right below the shoulder on the sleeve and on the shirt. So we're going to pin those. You've got your gathering, because the gathering was the same for everything. You got a notch down the sleeve, which matches the notch in the shirt. Now the shirt is going to show a double notch and a single notch for front and back. I don't know if the pattern made a mistake, but remember, just long as you do one side, each side the same, then we're good. If they had a front to a back, of course we have to make sure we do front to front, back to back. When I did it on the other shirt, it all lined up perfectly all right. So I guess the designers knew what they were doing. So in either case, go ahead and sew this seam. You got your gathering underneath, because you're going to be easing that in. The shirt does not have gathers, so make sure that we're easing it in. You're going to start from one side, back stitch, 5/8 inch seam all the way across. If you run your seam over your gathering stitch, that bottom one, it'll smooth that seam out. Make sure there are no puckers. You can see if it's going to pucker, but maneuver those gathers while you're sewing. Keep going all the way to this edge and back stitch, and then flip it over. If you don't see any puckers, you are good to trim with your pinking shears, or use your serger to clean that up. And in either case, make sure you press it and do the same for both sides. So let's go and do the sleeve now. Okay. Thank you guys for hanging in here with me. I have never done this on camera, so I hope I'm not being confusing. So your sleeve is now in, and it's time to close up the side seam. However, if you serged or pink and sheared, this is what your inside will look like. You can see the seam, but from one end of the sleeve down to the other. On this side of my sleeve, I did it just like you do. I sewed the 5/8 inch seam, I trimmed it, and I zigzagged it. So it looks like this. And of course, it looks nice and clean on the outside. When you press your seams, you're going to press that seam that we just made to the sleeve. So you got your seam, you made your seam, and you pressed it toward the sleeve. Here's the sleeve. You press the seam toward the sleeve. If you did the French seam, which I did on the other side, it wasn't quite as smooth. But what we do is, with wrong sides together, we sew that 1/4 inch or that 1/8 inch, and then we flip it over and do the same seam you did. So ours just looks different on the inside, but it's the same seam. Pressed it to the sleeve. Here's the sleeve. Pressed it to the sleeve. Now, if you got a pucker here and there, if when you're pressing, let me show you. Give me one moment. I don't have my iron right here, so you're not seeing me press, but when you're pressing, if you see a little gather, then go up under. First press it all to the one side, and then go up under there and curve it. You can use your hand if you have one. You know, you use your hand, that curves it for you, you know, and you can get right up under there with your big iron, your small iron, and press that thing. An iron will do wonders. Of course, I'm not using this one today. An iron will do wonders for getting those puckers straight, as long as you haven't sewn down a pucker. If it was in the gathering and you didn't quite get it smoothed out, you can smooth it out. So using a ham when you do a sleeve is brilliant. Now, it's time to close up the side of the shirt, and this is where it makes sense again to make sure that you are comfortable with the length of your shirt. If you are not, and you're looking at it and you're feeling like this is going to be too long, I'm just going to trim this. No, you don't want to do that. What you want to do is lay your shirt back out, the two front pieces, the back piece, lay it back out. Take that pattern piece, because we would have measured this initially up front, but it's really no big deal right now. Take that pattern piece, like here's the front. Mine's in two pieces because I did shrink the other one. So here's the front of the shirt. Right now you can still line it up, and you can tell by the notch that you have here. You would do that, and then you have your curve. You have your curve here, and so what you want to do is take the pattern piece, raise it up, and then go ahead and cut here. Let me see. Take that pattern piece, lay it back on the shirt, line it up with the notch that's still left over here in the very front. You can cut it off, or you can fold it up, but get it folded up so that it's too late to use the fold lines here, but you can do this. So cut it where the line is for view A, and go ahead and raise it up to where you want it, and then trim it off. Do that to the front and the back. If you have concluded at this point, yeah, I think the shirt's going to be too long. Otherwise, just leave it. So get your front piece, and the same thing with your back piece. Lay it down. We still have open notches that you can line it up with. The easier way is to cut this one pattern piece for view A, because view A is short, and all you want to do is raise up that pattern piece on top of the shirt, just so that because you don't want to go trimming and don't get it even. If you do it like this, you can get it evened out all the way around. So if at this point, this is our last chance to do this, if we want to do it right. You can always go back and do it right before we close, do the hem, but that makes it a little bit harder. It's easier to get it straight and to get it even at this point right here. So we are still on page 3 in our instructions. We just finished with number 6, step number 6. The sleeves and the side seams are the section we're in. So we're getting ready to do number 7, which is the side seams right here. The sleeve and the side get sewn up together. Now, when you're doing a French seam, the way I was doing mine, you can do that, but when it comes time to getting that curve in there, it's not always as easy. So we're going to take a little detour from that French seam and sew it another way. Now, I do things the long way, as you can see, but guarantee your garment is going to come out nice and neat. So here is your shirt right here. Here's the shirt right here. Right sides are together, and we're going to pin the sleeve. So the first thing we want to do is get the underarm on the front and the back, match that seam up right on it, seam to seam, and pin. Yes, if you're doing the French seam, do the same thing, right sides together, do the exact same thing. Then you want to pin the bottom of your sleeve even, when you close it up. So you got, here's your sleeve. Go ahead and pin that together now. When we do sew it, we're going to be using 5/8 inch seams. Now, those of you who are doing French seams, you're going to want to kill me later, but it's going to be all right. Okay, so we got the sleeve pin, but then we have to go on down and pin the side. Now, remember, there's a curve, and the front is shorter than the back. The front is shorter than the back. So that's the front, that's the back. They don't have a notch there, but that front was cut. When it was cut down, it actually is like a peak right here. It's cut, it's hard to see it, straight, and then it's like a peak. If you don't really see it, just get your pattern piece out and look at, let's see if I cut that other thing in half. Let's see if I got it on here. Well, my mistake. It does have a dot. I missed it. It does have a dot. Okay. So if you didn't get that dot, then go back and get it now. And that's what I'm going to do really, really, really quick. I don't know how I missed that, but oh, it's on the shirt. Okay. And it's right at that part. So here's my marking here. I know that wasn't my dot, but I know that the dot lines up with the thing. So hopefully you got it. Otherwise, lay that pattern piece back down and get that dot. And you got to get it on the other side also. And you only need it on the front or the back. You don't need it in both places because we're going to be sewing them together. Now, I'm lining up my front piece with my other front piece so that my dot is in the same place. So instead of dots for me, I have pins. You would have marked the dot. If you didn't see it, lay your pattern piece back on the shirt and go ahead and mark that dot. Now, let's go back to that side where we were, right here. We've done the sleeve. We pinned the sleeve. And we're pinning down, French seams and all. We're doing the same as everybody's doing the same thing. Right sides together. Here's my dot. Mark it here. And then pin all in between. Now, serging would be a whole lot easier. I always do this to myself, even though it would be just so much easier to change the thread, but I don't know. That my threader doesn't like me. So now we are pinned from the sleeve bottom all the way down. We have put our seam on to put our sleeve in is going toward the sleeve, and we have lined up seam to seam, front and back. And then we finish pinning up until our dot. So we're going to do this on both sides, and then we're going to go to the sleeve, back stitch. So a 5/8 inch stitch, go all the way, go across that sleeve seam, go all the way down, stop at the dot because we're leaving our curve open. Stop at the dot and back stitch. Let's do that now on both sides. Okay. Now you should have done the underarm seam, which is step number 7. Now, when I do my underarm, I know that looks kind of messy right now. When I do my underarm, I always double stitch, maybe like 2 inches from the seam of the sleeve and 2 inches from the seam of the shirt. Now, so it's been sewn together. This is the inside, the wrong side. This is what it should look like for you now. I'm sorry. This is what it should look like. Okay. Now, if you serged your seams, you have you serged the pieces while they were separated, or you're going to go on and serge them while they're separated, because when you sew the seam here, of course you left, let me see how to get this the right way. You left this open because this was the dot where you had to stop after you sewed up here. So this was the dot. So then you're going to, now we have to go ahead and clean this edge up. We got to clean this edge up. Wait a minute. Okay. We got to clean this edge up. So you're going to iron up 1/8 of an inch. You're going to iron, you're going to follow right on around the curve. If for any reason you feel like the curve's not doing right, you can do a basting stitch where you can gather it just a little bit and it will form the curve. But usually the way they do it, you can iron up 1/8 all the way around, and then you're going to come back and iron up again so that you get the clean look like this. Now, that's if you serged. And then, of course, your seams are pressed open. You want your seams pressed open all of the way. You know, yeah, you want your seam pressed open. If we started off doing the French seam, we can do one of two things. For me, I am going to, let me get on this side. I am going to iron my 1/8 and then flip it over again. But I am turning in 1/8 on all of my seams because I am going to do my top stitching from the bottom all the way around. I'm going all the way up to the underarm seam. I am top stitching all the way up there. So this way, since I couldn't French seam it, I even rolled the seam under on both sides, and I'll be stitching them down. Now I'm going to stitch them down up to the underarm seam. Now my sleeve is the same. It's pressed open. That raw edge is folded under, but the sleeve part I'm going to hand stitch. If you don't want to do all of that, keeping up with the French seam thing, you can zigzag your sleeve and close it up. But I'm going to press mine under my shirt from here all the way around. I'm going to stitch it all the way up to the underarm on both sides. So it's a little extra work, but that's the way I'm going to do it because that's the look, the clean look I want inside. And then, of course, even around the back, you do your 1/8 and then turn it under and go on all the way around. So you're going to top stitch the front. Let's get it right side out. Ooh, I'm glad it's coming together because this cotton fabric is raveling and all these little threads are getting on my nerves. But that's what happens when you don't serge. Okay. So here's your shirt. Let's see if I can get a better angle. Yeah. Okay. Here's your shirt. Fold it in half. Okay. Now, iron up your sleeve hem. So you're going to clean that edge up with a surgeon stitch or turn under 1/8 so that you get a clean finish. But go ahead and iron up your hem. When you press your seams, don't forget all the seams were pressed open. Either we're going to slip stitch them from the sleeve, underarm all the way down and then top stitch the curve, or we're going to slip stitch all of it, whichever way you want to do. But your top stitch is going to go from, you're starting from the open part, single layer of the front of the jacket. You're going to go around the curve. You're going to go all the way up to where that seam starts to close up. For those of us who did the French seams, we're going to top stitch all the way up to the underarm seam. But otherwise, you're going to top stitch there. Then you're going to come down from that opening and go all the way around. This is the bottom of the back. You're going to go all the way around and up to the opening on this side. French seaming, we're going to keep going to the underarm. And then you're going to come back to the other front piece, which is here, and you're going to top stitch all the way around to here. And we are almost done. The only thing that's going to be left is the neckband. Yeah, because that neckband and the front band, I call it a collar, are all in one. So this is what we're looking like so far. I do like it. It's kind of big on me. I don't know how yours is fitting you. I'm in a size 8. Well, it's not that big now that I got the seams all done. Here's my sleeve. I'm going to hem my sleeve up, and I'm looking like this, which even though I feel like it's kind of long, I'm probably going to wear a belt and some leggings with mine. But after you get the top stitching from here all the way up into here, clean it up inside, and then you're going to do from here, the back, all the way around to this part of the back. And everything, it should be looking nice and clean on the inside. Even though when we were French seaming, now we're going to be top stitching here. It's almost like a flat felt seam, but it's not. But it's a lot of work. It's extra work. It's not a lot of work. It's extra work, but it's nice and clean on the inside. We're going to put the band on here and down the front, and then we have buttonholes. So let's go ahead and hem our sleeve. If you want to hand sew it, you can. If you want to top stitch, you can. I'm going to be top stitching mine because my shirt is very casual. So I'm going to top stitch mine. Even though I only have a small like roll hem on the bottom of my shirt, I am doing a hem on here, and this hem is about 1 inch. Yeah, it's about 1 inch wide, but I kind of want it that way. And when we top stitch the band, that's about 1 inch too, so that it'll all blend in together. So I'm going to top stitch mine all the way up to the underarm, and then the underarm, the sleeve itself, where I press my seam open but fold it under those raw edges, I'm going to catch those in with my hand just because, and hem my sleeve on the machine. So go ahead and do that now. Give everything a really, really good press because it's taken a while, but our shirt is looking pretty good right now. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, we're back. We're almost finished, guys. We have the front band, the neck band, and we will be done. So we just did number 8 and number 9, step number 8 and number 9. So of course we left off ironing our curved hem, and we went and top stitch it. So this is what mine is looking like all the way around. Top stitch, this is the bottom, top stitched all the way around. And remember, those of us that were doing French seams, we even top stitched all the way up to the underarm. So our top stitch went from the curve all the way up the underarm, and then down the curves around. So the underarm is top stitched like that because we wanted our inside to look like this. Even though now if you serge, you still have a nice clean finish. If you just pink, use your pinking shears, these zigzag scissors. These don't stop all the raveling, but they will control it better than just straight scissors. And so some people do that. So we did that, and then we, when we got to the inside of the sleeve, if you serged or pinked, it's clean. But if you did the French seams and we had to do our sleeve and our side like this, we pressed it open, turned it under, and I hand stitched these seams down. And then of course my hem on my sleeve, I did on the machine. I did 2 rows going around on the machine. You could have hand stitched yours or did it. And I'm feeling pretty good about my shirt now. It was so wrinkled because this is a cotton, but I should have paid attention to what kind of cotton, because if you look at it, it looks like linen. It's wrinkling like linen, but it's laying and sewing like linen. And what I mean by that is fabric. As you learn your fabrics, if you don't already know, as you learn your fabrics, you'll know that certain fabrics will curve when you want them to curve. Certain fabrics will, seams will lay open when you want them to lay open. This is a cotton, and it had a little bit of stretch in it, and it just curved right on around. But I'm feeling much, much, much better about my shirt because I couldn't do all those threads and everything that I was dealing with. I had to get this thing cleaned up. Now when you look at it, it looks nice and clean on the inside. Got my face and sew. Now we're going to put the front band on. So the instructions, we are on number 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So 10 through 16. So you had 2 pieces, two of the front band that look like this. Because this is not a facing where you're going to turn the whole thing to the inside and then do your buttonholes. This is actually like a placket. So if you look at the pattern real good, this is where we are, right here. Putting this band, and we're going to go back and put the collar. That's last. They call it a neck band. I'm calling it a collar. But right now, this is where we are. We're putting the band on. So we had to make the band. So you interfaced it. That was instructed for us in the very beginning. You put the interfacing on, and then you took the 2 of the bands, because you cut 4. You took 2 of the bands, sewed them together like this. And I've sewn mine already, guys. Sewed them together like this. And then they wanted you to, so you had that, but they wanted you to flip it over and understitch. Understitching is when you go real close to the seam and stitch down. That's what helps it fold over and stay down. So here is my band, and on the flip side is where it got understitched. And then of course this edge stitch right here. If you are serging, you might have just serged this inside edge. It always looks clean anyway, even if you serge when you fold it over, but you may have just done that. So now the front piece is ready to be sewn to your shirt. They do give you instructions, let's see, number 12, to close up the bottom of your band before you put it on the jacket, but we're not going to do that. We're going to put the band on our shirt and then close up that bottom. I did it that way because I noticed my fabric had stretched a little bit. I wasn't sure if my band was the same length as my shirt. So I did. Now, this is what it looks like when you put it on. Here's the band right here. And I sewed it. I sewed the band to the jacket. To the shirt. So here is your shirt. There's the double notch that you're going to be matching up. You're going to take the band and you're going to line up that notch wherever it is. I know I got one. There it is. You're going to line up that notch and pin. And you're only doing one layer. This should be open. This part of the facing that you turned under that seam and that you top stitch should be open. So you're going to line it up at that notch. Then you're going to line it up at the top. There is a dot up here. You're going to line it up at that dot and pin. And you're going to pin it all the way and sew it all the way down. Now, there is a little curve here, so the instructions say to pivot. It's not a deep pivot. If you follow the pattern or if you follow the cut, it's going to pivot anyway. It's going to go right on and turn in and have you keep going straight down. So we'll get this pinned, and once you get it pinned and sew it down, you're going to get it all pinned and sew it down. Then we can close up the bottom so that it looks like this on the inside. So I sewed it all the way down right here. I sewed the seam connecting the band to the shirt all the way down. Once I saw how much hem I needed for the band, because mine was a little bit longer, that's when I flipped it over and sewed that seam going across. Now, when you'll see it when you actually sew it. I don't want to confuse you, but you'll see it when you actually sew it. Now, if you go back and you're looking at the instructions, because hopefully you're looking at the instructions or glancing at them just to see where I'm at and, see if I've changed anything. If I was not doing it this way, there might be one or two changes I would have made, but I pretty much would make it the same way. It's a very simple thing. So once you get that band on, this is what it looks like. This part of your collar is still open because the band only went to the top where the middle of the neckline is. So here's your neckline and the band went here. So here's the band. You can see the seam, barely, but you can see the seam. After I turned it over, pressed it down, this is what the band looks like. I'm clipping it. I don't want to keep putting pins in my shirt because you can see them, but this is what the band looks like when it's on. Here it is at the bottom, lined right up with the hemline that's there. So you're going to do that on both sides. Now, they tell us to slip stitch this closed. So somebody might feel like, let's see. Yeah, they tell us to slip stitch it closed just to help you keep it closed. I got mine clipped because they do an edge stitch all the way down. So we're going to be putting on the facing. We're not stitching in the ditch, meaning in the seam. We're stitching a little bit over to the edge, and it says, yeah, it says to it just says edge stitch. So you come real close to the seam on the inside of the band and stitch it all the way down to the bottom. And that's what's going to catch this, because they do not do this hem here. So even if you got confused when let's see what I do with it. Even if when you go to put your band on and you're not quite knowing what to do with it once you get to the bottom, what you can do is get to the bottom of your band. You're putting your band on, you get to the bottom and it looks like this. See? And you sew your seam. Let's just say that your seam has been sewn and you went all the way down. You came all the way down right here. When you flip it over, all you have to do, if you can't figure out how to get that sewn across there, you flip it over and then you just tuck this inside and hand stitch it closed. So you'll still have that same effect, because the pattern guide does not top stitch this part anyway. So you, if it's like, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do? Don't even worry about closing that up. Just once it's sewn all the way down to the bottom, you'll be able to look at it and see how to close it. If not, you just go ahead and iron it over and close it up with a slip stitch. I hope I'm saying that right. So I'm going to do that side also. I only did the one side, but I wanted to show you what it was looking like so far. Again, it's looking pretty good. Let's see. See, this is what it's going to do. So this one's not sewn, but see how this one so far is sewn once that little stand-up neckband goes on there. And then this will cross over and button, and we get this look. Like I said, mine is quite long. I'm going to leave it long. I like the full sleeve. I'm going to be wearing mine with a belt more than likely. But this is what that band starts to look like. So I gave my shirt a hard press. I trimmed all my seams. I was going to say I cut all my threads, but I see a thread. But I got rid of all the things. Once it starts looking good inside, I feel so much better, because the other way that I was looking at this shirt, it was driving me crazy. So looking good, guys. So sew your band, your front band on the left and right side of the front pattern pieces. And then we're going to be moving over to the collar. Now, when we get to the collar, which comes after step number 17, they want us to flip over to view A and follow the collar instructions there. So we're gonna, after we get the bands on, we're going to turn over or go back, and we're going to go to step number 17 on page 2 of the instructions, step number 17 through 23, to see how to put our collar on. Okay, so you should have put your band on, your front band on the right side and the left side, the front, and it should look like this. You should have done your edge stitch it instructed us to do an edge stitch. Now mine looks like this on the inside. If you serge, you're gonna see your serge seams here if you sewed it under a little bit. But this is what it looks like. And there's my edge stitch, just a teeny stitch going all the way down. And what I did on my other side, just to make sure we were all on the same page, is remember when I said if you don't understand what I meant by don't worry about folding that edge under when you get to it. This is what I'm talking about. So I did this side. My shirt is one side gonna be made one way and the right side gonna be made another way as long as it looks the same. So what I did was I sewed the facing all the way down like we're supposed to, and then I ironed this under and then turned my facing over so it looked like that. Because when I do the edge stitch down here, it's going to close this up. I can hand stitch this if I want to, but it'll close it up. So if you didn't sew your seam across and then turn it inside out, this is another way you can do it, you know, so that you don't feel like you're going to mess it up. And so the top stitching, the edge stitch coming down all the way down, we do not top stitch here. And if you want, you can hand slip right there. And it has the same look as it does on the other side. This one is closed because it's a seam. This one will be closed once you slip stitch it, and it's underneath, nobody's there looking at it. So I'm gonna leave mine just like this because throughout my jacket my two sides kind of look a little bit different. Now we're gonna move on over to the collar, and remember we have to flip over to page 2 of the instructions. We were on page 3, but we're going back to page 2 of the instructions, and we're picking up on the collar right here. Step number 17 is the same for view A and view B. And you're going to look at the directions and make the collar. So you had the two pieces. It looks like this. And there were 2 of them. You cut 2 fabric. You cut 1 interfacing. And it's made like this. Now, you have a dot here that you had to mark. You had a notch here that you had to mark. I always mark or clip my center seam. And then of course on the opposite you had another notch here that you had to match up. And then here's the dart over here. So you had 2 of these. One was interfaced, and the interface side is the one that goes to the underside. Mine is backwards. So you sew it together. So it looks like this. You've sewn it, you know, around your collar as best you can, go all the way down. And then you're going to turn it over. Well, you always clip in those round areas, under arms, in a crotch, around the neck. Always clip those areas because that will allow it to turn easier and trim that seam. And here you have your collar. This is the outside. I have gone on and ironed up the part that's like a facing. I did understitch under there once I turned it over. So here's my collar, and it instructs us to understitch, and then it tells us to go ahead and put the collar on. So I am looking at the inside of my jacket. I'm going to flip it around because I'm going to pin my collar to the outside of the jacket, right sides to right sides, matching center seams and notches. So Here's my center seam. I am matching my center seam and pinning, and I'm only doing one layer. I am not attaching this. I'm just doing one layer. So let me get my notch and match it to this notch. I'm going to go on the other side and get this notch and match it to this notch. And I do need to tell you, I didn't say it when we just looked at it. The notch is here, but there's also a dot here, is the various sizes. Make a little clip or a note there because that's actually the shoulder seam. So you got a notch here, you got your center here, but right here I made a little clip, and that's actually my shoulder seam because all of this is going to have to be eased in. So let's pin that. If you didn't mark it, you just know that it all has to fit. Now we want the edge of this to match up with that pink dot, which was right here. And really what it is a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So the collar, I'll drop the pin. The collar went all the way to the edge of the band. You see how I pinned it? Lined it up evenly with the band. Now this collar is going to act like it does not want to fit. I can see that now. And when it does that, what I will probably do is clip the neckband of the blouse itself, and that will allow it to give a little bit so that this collar will fit. If it doesn't seem like that will work, then I'm going to have to take it loose and make the collar smaller. But I'm following all the seam lines, so it should fit, just having to make some adjustments. If it doesn't fit, like I said, we may just very well have to take it loose and make the collar a little bit smaller, but I'm hoping we don't have to do that. I'm going to get mine pinned all the way on, and then I'm going to clip my band, my neck of my shirt, the actual shirt. I'm going to clip. Remember, we stay stitched around here. So I'm going to clip to that stitching so that it will allow the shirt to give, so that my collar will fit, because it's fitting, but it's got a little bit of puckers there. So I know that means it just needs to be able to give. I don't want to really make the collar smaller because then that's not going to do right. So it's pinned on here, but these areas where I got a little bit of give, we're going to clip this neckline, and it should give. So go ahead, get your collar pinned up, matching your notches, the 2 notches on each side, the middle seam. Take your collar all the way to the edge of the front band on each side. And then, of course, if you went back and marked, or if you marked already, we can match up at the shoulder seams. So go ahead and do that. Once you get that done, we got to clip it again, so that we're clipping the collar also, so that it rounds, so that it goes into that round shape. We're going to iron it, and the seam gets ironed up. You're going to iron the seam up. So that seam is going to get ironed up. And then, of course, our collar underside will go down and clean it up like this. And it did the same thing it said to do, an edge stitch on the outside. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, as you can see, I am finished. I did the collar, just as I said, got that collar on. It's, the edges are meeting real nice right here, right here. I did not have to cut my collar. I just clipped my neck edge on the blouse and kind of stretched it to fit, and it came out fine. So it's like that. I cleaned up the inside. I actually did handwork. I didn't do that edge stitch. I just stitched it down by hand. And then I went on and made my buttonholes. The pattern calls for 8. I did 7 because they required, I think, 1/2 inch buttons. Yeah, they did 8 1/2 inch buttons, and I did 7 5/8 inch buttons. I don't like those 1/2 inch buttons, so I got my buttonholes. This is open, remember, just like this. This is open. That's open there. So button starts here, and that's how mine is. It's open. Button starts here, and I have 7 buttonholes. You can see it. These, I chose buttons that look like this. So they just a natural cream color blending in with the blouse. Everything is cleaned up inside. Cleaned up inside real good, everything. And the blouse is ready to go. So all I have to do now is give it a good press, put it on, and take some pictures. But Butterick blouse 6929, Butterick 6929 is finished. So that's gonna be it. So this is the cotton linen fabric. The other one that I made is out of a charmeuse. I'll take pictures of that one too, so that you can see the difference. But overall, the blouse came out pretty nice. I do like it. I think it's gonna look good with leggings. I don't I don't even really have a pair of leggings. I might have to get a pair, but I probably have some that I can take pictures in, but you know, that's it. But anyway, here it is, all finished up. Yeah, starting to see the buttons and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.